is here. I'm really happy to see. We have actually, in terms of appointments, a fully constituted SRC. I'm hoping the other three people will arrive and we'll have actually a fully constituted SRC meeting. Could we just start? If people pull up people on your list, so I'm a little confused because Maya, you seem to be in the room and in the waiting room, but. So if people can just look at the list and we can go around and introduce ourselves in the order I think that it appears. So it's in alphabetical order. I'm Andy Reese. I'm the Director of the Department on Disability Services. It's mostly in alphabetical order. Ms. Daniels keeps moving up and down my list. So we'll start with Ms. Daniels. Ms. Daniels. Okay. Next, and all the rest are in alphabetical order. Allison?
Hi, good morning. This is Allison White with the DC Developmental Disabilities Council.
Berta?
Hi, good morning. My name is Berta Mata from Advocate for Justice in Education.
Cedric? Cedric was the first person here. Cedric Rivers is one of our business representatives, and he is from, I believe, Marriott Hotels. Deborah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Russell. I'm the Associate Director for Performance and Impact at the Workforce Investment Council.
Riola.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Riola Dorico, and I am a volunteer and resident, well, a volunteer to the council, and I thank you all for accepting me and inviting me. I'm a resident of Washington, D.C. since 2019, so I'm excited to be here, and I'm a resident of Ward 8 and an individual with disabilities.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sandy, who is here on Chloe's behalf. And I would say, Sandy, since you're near the end of the alphabet, you could text Chloe now.
I don't know if I can text and talk at the same time. But I am Sandy Bernstein. I'm the legal director at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. We're the Protection and Advocacy Program and Client Assistance Program for DC. Yes, and I am filling in for Chloe while she's on maternity leave, and I'm going to text her right now.
So next up, representing the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointment, we have two folks, Tierra and Vida. If you could introduce yourselves. Oh, and then we do have people in the room who have not introduced themselves. Sorry. So before we get to Tierra and Vida, in the room, we also have.
Hi, my name is Anjali McGugan. I am one of the VR supervisors here at RSA.
Good morning, my name is Lucas Lefevre. I'm a VR specialist here with RSA.
Good morning, my name is Susan Brooks. I'm with RSA of Washington.
And now from the Mayor's Office.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tierra Williams. I am an associate director in the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. I'm sure I've met many of your faces on the last interview, so I'm sure you're familiar with a number of emails, and good seeing you all today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vida Van Hel. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. And it's my pleasure to be here today on behalf of our director, Steve Walker, and on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser to get folks sworn in to the State Rehabilitation Council.
And Chloe Peoples, the director of our client assistance program at Disability Rights DC, has joined us. So Chloe, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. Chloe Peoples, staff attorney at Disability Rights DC. I'm the client assistance program advocate.
So I will turn it over to Mona.
Really quickly, I just wanted to verify from new members' perspective if Georges is here.
George is not here.
George is not here. Okay, is Maya here? Maya Daniels.
He appears to be.
Yes, I'm
but-
here.
Okay.
Ah, wonderful. Could you introduce, I'm sorry, there seem to be some technical issues,
Yes.
Ms. Daniels, with introducing yourself. So if you could introduce yourself and then.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Maya Daniels. I'm the Human Resources Manager at the Grand Hyatt Washington. And happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. Sorry. Now back to you again, Tiara.
No worries. I just want to make sure I have everyone down who was here to be sworn in. The last two people I have is Eric Dewar.
He is not here. And
Okay.
Michelle Johnson appears not to be here.
Okay. What about, is Alex Sherman in the room?
No.
Okay, then Moda will connect with them separately to get them sworn in. And now I'll pass it on to Ms. Rangel.
I'm sorry, may I interject for a second? I forgot, I haven't been able to introduce myself. My name is Cedric Rivers. I'm the Director of Human Resources Operations at JW Marriott.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce myself again, just out of habit. Good morning, everyone. Vida Van Helm. I'm the Director of Operations at the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. And I'm glad to be here on behalf of our director, Steve Walker, and on behalf of Mayor Bowser to get everyone sworn in to the State Rehabilitation Council. It's going to be a quick and easy process. We'll ask folks to come on camera and to turn their microphones on as they're able. And I'll walk through the oath line by line and just ask you to repeat after me. After the swearing in, Tiara will follow up with emails to everyone with a written copy of your oath that will need to be signed and returned for the public record. And we will also mail out certificates of your appointments to the addresses that we have on file for full. And with that, we'll dive right in. If you could raise your right hand or otherwise indicate that you're swearing an oath and repeat after me. I state your name.
I
Chloe Peoples.
Having been appointed to
Having been
appointed to
the State Rehabilitation Council
the State
Rehabilitation
Council
in the government of the District of Columbia,
in the
The
government
government of the District of Columbia,
do solemnly swear or affirm that
do
do
solemnly
solemnly swear or affirm that
I state your name,
I
I,
Chloe
Deborah
Peoples,
Russell,
will support and defend
will support
support
and
and
defend
the Constitution of the United States
the
the
Constitution
Constitution of the United States
and the laws of the District of Columbia,
and the
and the
laws
laws of the District of Columbia,
that I will perform such duties
that I will
that I will
perform
perform such duties
as may be assigned to me in this position
as
as
may be
may be
assigned to me
in this position
to the best of my ability,
to the best
to the
of my
best of my ability,
ability,
without fear or favor,
without
without fear or favor,
that I will exercise my best judgment
that I will
that I
that I will
will exercise my best judgment
and will consider each matter before me
and will
and will
consider
consider each matter before me
from the viewpoint of
from
from the
the
viewpoint
viewpoint
of
of
the best interest of the District of Columbia as a whole.
the
best
best
interest of the District of Columbia as a whole.
And that I will faithfully discharge said duties.
And I
And
will
I will
faithfully
faithfully discharge such duties.
Congratulations, and thank you so much for your service on this important council. We look forward to the great things that you'll accomplish working together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Yeah.
congratulations, everyone. And I did just have one quick verification. Was Majorie and Antonio also in the room?
Antonio?
Myers?
I think that that's a person on the SILC, not the SRC. I don't
Okay.
recognize the name.
Okay. What about
I
Majorie
hope-
Gilliard?
Who?
Majorie Gilliard?
That also is SILC, not SRC. I hope, because they're not on the invitation for the SRC meeting.
Okay, no worries. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, first up, what we need to talk about, I am chairing today's meeting only because we did not have an SRC until today, a fully constituted SRC, I am happy to say. Going forward, however, we should have a chairperson who will facilitate this meeting. The chairperson will preside over all meetings of the SRC, call special meetings as needed, establish necessary committees and appoint chairpersons to those committees, and serve as a spokesperson for the State Rehab Council. They will have staff support from our agency. Unfortunately, our project manager, who will be supporting them, left the agency. And so we are recruiting for that position. And so as that person is hired, they will be someone who will support them. They also will serve as a liaison to, there's the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation Services has trainings. They have conferences twice a year. They have meetings that include meetings of state rehab councils. And so they could go to those to learn about being on the council and to represent the district at those. They are responsible for serving as the chairperson of the executive committee. And then any other duties as assigned, I notice as necessary. They're not assigned because you're chairperson. And what I don't see in, I'm just reading through the bylaws that we have in draft form still. What I don't see here is that they will prepare an annual report that is submitted to the mayor and the Department of Education, also with staff support from RSA. So, and then within the SRC, we have historically had, and our draft current bylaws provide for 4 committees, which include consumer empowerment and advocacy, excuse me, media and public awareness, policy, planning and review, and a committee, the Consortium of Councils for People with Disabilities, and a nominating committee that would be responsible for identifying new members. So I guess what we can start with is there someone who is interested and willing to be the chairperson? I won't put you on the spot today to immediately turn the meeting over to you. But what in the past, when I was in my current role, I would meet with that person in advance of the meeting and help develop the agenda with them and talk about what would be on the agenda and, get prepared for each of the meetings. So as I say, whoever agrees to do this, it would be with support from from staff at the agency, as well as myself. So now I'm going to employ some of my skills from years ago when I was a social worker and just sit back and wait.
Director Reese, can I ask a question?
Sure.
On average, what would you say is the time commitment? I saw you enumerate kind of everything that was going on and the responsibilities, but what would you say is the time commitment on average?
I don't think it's huge. I'm trying to think. I mean, because less than 2 hours a month, I believe. Now, let me just say this. One of the things on our agenda is that we are going to have to do a state plan update that's due in July, and that's going to require some work, but we'll also have an ad hoc committee, and that's going to require some time from many of us. It'll be done by committee and not by the full SRC, because if it's done by the full SRC, every single meeting is a public meeting and has to be publicized and notice provided, et cetera, et cetera. If a committee works on it, they can work on it and present information at the public meeting. But I see that as taking a lot of time. I do know Chloe's already left, although Anjali can speak to like preparing the annual report. That would have been like a full day of work.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think it's a terrible amount of time commitment. It is a consistent, we have meetings every other month, so it would mean, meeting with me for probably 30 minutes the week before the meeting to talk about the agenda.
Thank you.
This is Riola. I have a question too. Dr. Reese, your involvement with the potential chairperson or the new chairperson, could there be any mentoring for a period so that the acclimation process, if it's a new person in that role, would be an easier, smoother transition? Or would you just completely exit without?
Oh, no, absolutely. I will continue to serve on the SRC representing the state rehabilitation, the state agency. And I have actually been between being deputy director for RSA, being their attorney and being the director here. I've been here for 14 years now. So I would definitely, I'm not just going to say, thanks, here you go, bye. I will be available to support whoever is willing to step up. And it's Andy, by the way, and I have a law degree, but no doctorate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, unless anybody else would like to do it, I'll volunteer and I'll be happy to serve in that role if there's not anybody else. But
Well, if there is a vice chair or someone to work behind you, or not say behind you, but to complement or whatever, I would be interested in that as well, just for the learning especially and the support.
and from my understanding, because there are separate committees, there would be like co-chairs or not necessarily co-chairs, but like a committee head or lead.
There would be chairs of each of the 4 committees.
Yes.
And you are correct, there is a vice chair. So am I hearing that Anjali would be the chair and Riola would be the vice chair? Be careful, because we'll vote really quickly. Going once. Wonderful. Okay. So as I said, I'm not gonna, I'll continue with the agenda today, but I will pass it on for our next meeting. And next, in terms of organization, as I said, we have had in the past these 4 committees, and I'll just review again. I want to see if there's more description here. Yes. So I can review what the committees are and what the responsibilities of each committee is. Oh, can we just, maybe it's by acclamation, take a vote. All in favor of Anjali as chair of the SRC, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
And okay, that sounded like a majority to me. And all in favor of Riola as our vice chair.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations. So now, first we have what's called the Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy Committee. Or yes, and this committee is responsible for developing a method to determine the degree of the degree of RSA client satisfaction with the quality of services and other DC programs and agencies, including client assistance program, DDA, and other programs and agencies that affect people who receive services from the VR agency. The committee should conduct an annual operations audit of RSA service delivery to determine the value and effectiveness of RSA programs, contractors, and grantees to ensure compliance with the Rehab Act. Develop and make recommendations and submit them to the Policy Planning and Review Committee. Just so people are aware, we do have a performance management unit within our quality assurance and performance management administration. And so whoever agrees to take this on, they would work along with Mary Morgan or someone she identifies. So is there anyone who is interested and or willing, or interested and willing to take on, and just to remind people so that if you're thinking, well, I'm not sure which of them I would be interested in taking on, there's consumer empowerment and advocacy, media and public awareness, policy planning and review, and a nominating committee. There's also reference to the Consortium of Councils for People with Disabilities. Allison, are you aware of that still existing?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so we're going to leave that.
No.
In a very positive way, I think. I mean, it speaks positively to the history of the SRC. There was a lot of references early on to the coordination with the other group that represents people with disabilities, the Council for People with Disabilities.
The
I'm
commission.
messing up the title.
The Commission on Persons with Disabilities.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, with the DD Council and Commission bylaws both reference each other also. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to always be coordinating together.
So, so as I said, we have consumer empowerment and advocacy, media and public awareness, policy planning and review, and nominating committee, which a nominating committee will be fairly easy initially because we did just get 15 people. However, I will say that there is one position that we're going to want to fill within the next 6 months. So there will be some outreach required. So would people like me to describe in detail all 4 or try to convince someone to do the first one first, or which, does that work better?
Can you do all 4?
Yeah.
And that way we can have a better understanding, and then yes.
Yep.
Can I ask a quick question here, please?
Of course.
Now, are we to get involved in the committees as well? Say I'm
So-
vice chair, but am I also able to get involved in some of the committees?
Oh, absolutely. Probably either, I mean, we'll see who all wants to volunteer. But serving on committees, like there'll be a chair, but then that chair will pull people together to help them with the work of the committee.
Okay.
And I think one of the good things Allison did on the DD Council is required everyone to identify which committee they would work with, right?
Yes, thank you. And I
So-
asked that question because I've had a long year's interest in quality assurance and quality care. And it dates back to learning about Edward Demings in my undergraduate years decades ago. And it was just so fascinating. So that would definitely be an area, the quality area, I would like to work.
So the second committee is Media and Public Awareness Committee. And that committee would be responsible for developing programs, training, and other activities for people with disabilities and their families to increase public awareness and knowledge about the rehabilitation services and to maintain visibility of VR services and of the SRC. We actually have both a public information officer and an intake and outreach supervisor.
Business specialist.
Oh, right, and a business specialist who would support people in this work. The next committee, the Policy Planning and Review Committee, reviews and evaluates the RSA state plan, coordinates recommendations provided by standing committees for use in the annual report. Interestingly, it doesn't speak to, but really takes the lead on reviewing RSA policies that are developed, reviewing existing policies to make recommendations about needed changes, and reviewing policies that are drafted. And I know that Chloe's played a very active role in that in the past, but I'm not. So is anyone interested in the policy committee?
Chloe was the chair of it before? Or
I
no?
think that if she wasn't, she did all the work. So
Yeah, it's very Chloe. Yeah, I mean, I assume, well, who knows, she might hate me, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that we can nominate her. I don't know if we can do that when she's not here, but I'll help.
I think that we've almost always had the person from the CAP in that role.
Okay,
So-
yeah, no, I know, yeah, I believe that that's true. So, if she hates me, I'll take it on.
Thank you. And last, a nominating committee, which would be someone who would be responsible for working with us and MODA when we have to identify new members to the State Rehabilitation Council, to identify potential new members and refer them to MODA, and maybe even help shepherd them through that process, which all of us now know is much more of a process than it used to be.
Andy, this is Allison. I'm happy to do that. Chair that or lead it or whatever.
Ah, wonderful.
What's that one called again? I'm just for my notes.
I think it's called recruitment. No, I'm nominating, sorry, the nominating committee.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy, this is Deborah. I would be happy to serve in the public media and public awareness.
Thank you.
And what's the title of the first committee again?
The first committee was called Consumer Empowerment and Advocacy. And I apologize. I'm already because I'm not keeping up my notes here. Already blanking on, I know, did someone did volunteer for the Media and Public Awareness Committee? Or did we move right past that?
Deborah
Deborah
just,
did.
yeah.
Can more than one person volunteer? Or like, can you have more than one under the media and public awareness?
So these are just the chairs of the committee.
Okay.
So absolutely,
Okay.
those chairs will be reaching out to people to support them on the committee.
Okay.
So I understand it correctly. So the people who have volunteered to be chairs of the committee, those committees?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then I'm open to hearing from people how they would like to handle membership on the committee. I mean, it could be either that we ask everyone to identify a committee they will regularly serve on, which could make the most sense in terms of making sure that all of the committees have at least a couple of people. And then that those committees are very public about the work they're doing. Because generally speaking, I expect that any committee would welcome any additional help, even from people who haven't asked to be members. So we have consumer empowerment and advocacy, policy, media, and nominating. Oh, good. So what I'd like people to do, and then we'll have the record here, is in the chat, could everyone list your first and second preference for committees that you would like to serve on or are willing to serve on? So we have four committees. And so if people could just list, I think, first and second preference, consumer empowerment and advocacy, media and public awareness, policy, and nominating.
This is Allison. I'll just chime in, Andy. I'm a fan of that approach, having everybody choose at least one committee. I think that's an important responsibility we take on if we're members of this group. So thank you for that.
The room could just tell.
As for the consumer empowerment and advocacy, since a lot of that is quality reviews of RSA programming, I assume if you work for an agency that provides RSA programming, you would recluse yourself from that. Or is that not necessary?
I don't think that's necessarily true, because you might have good insights, especially on the committee, so.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to serve on that committee.
Would you like to
That would
be
be
the
my
chair?
one.
Oh, so I'm going to,
Consumer and empowerment.
I will in the chat, because we're using the chat as our record, because we'll maintain this chat, right? Charlisa, so Susan. Consumer advocacy. And Lucas.
Media and public awareness.
And did each of you have a second choice in case?
Okay.
We'll do media and public awareness as my second.
Could you please repeat the third and fourth options?
I will put the options in the chat. So just, second choice for Lucas and Susan.
My second choice would be policy.
And mine would be media and public awareness.
Okay.
Also like to, I'll do the policy.
I'm thinking as chair, I mean, you certainly can,
I'll just jump in.
but, okay, yeah. Okay, so has everyone had an opportunity to put a first and second choice in the chat? And what I will do then is leave this to our four, is it four or three? Our four chairpersons to then reach out to the people who have, as long as every committee has at least the chairperson, at least one other person, then everyone will have their first choice. If there's a committee that had no one listed as their first choice, then someone's second choice is going to get slid in at, to that committee. And I will include all of that information in the minutes and forward the contact information for the people who've agreed to work on this to the respective chairpersons.
Mandy, can you provide a little bit more clarity about the committee nominating those?
You're kind of fading in and out, Michelle.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. When I sent out the agenda, I put comprehensive statewide needs assessment and then state plan update, but I'm going to do them in the opposite order. The state plan update, for one, is that by the end of the year, our plan was conditionally approved because we didn't yet have a fully constituted SRC. The mayor's order appointing everyone is being published in the DC Register tomorrow. So we will be addressing that issue tomorrow. And Department of Ed will coordinate with Department of Labor. I spoke with our liaison this week, Deborah, so that you have that update about where our part of the state plan is in terms of finalization. The other issue that we had with our state plan is that your state plan is supposed to be based on your most current comprehensive statewide needs assessment. And so there's the section of the state plan that speaks to the goals and the priorities, the goals and objectives for VR services for the upcoming 4 years, which should be based on the needs assessment. Our needs assessment was not completed until our state plan was already submitted. And therefore, the state plan usually is a 4-year plan that has an update at year 2 to make any amendments that are necessary. Because our initial state plan was not based on the current needs assessment, we have an update due July 1, 2025. And so one of the first things that we will be working on is looking at the comprehensive statewide needs assessment, looking at our goals and objectives in the existing state plan, and identifying changes that we want to make for our state plan that will go from 24 through 27. Am I getting those years right? Thank you. And so one of the things we will start working on very soon is the way that we've done this, just so people, we used to have to do a state plan every year. And so the time frame for the tasks that need to be done for this, I kind of have some old muscle memory about that. And we would start inside the agency in January and start with the SRC in February. So we're kind of right on track. I found each year as we did them that we got better and better at incorporating stakeholder input, because when we did it year after year, rather than sort of looking at this document and, you know, changing the year, saying, does that look okay? And moving forward, we really took our time engaging first with the State Rehab Council. Then we also had meetings with our providers. We had meetings in the community, meetings with our staff to look at the goals and objectives identified by the SRC, and then hear from people if they thought that we captured everything, and really try and have a comprehensive plan for the next few years about what our goals and objectives are for the state plan for the district. And so what that means is, for one, I did include, for people who, you know, on that snowy day the other day, while you were sitting at home and before you had a chance to shovel your walk, you could have reviewed this 193-page document included in the agenda for today's meeting. I do have a PowerPoint where I can walk through the recommendations that were made at on each section of the comprehensive statewide needs assessment. So the way that the sort of schedule of things goes, states are required to engage in a comprehensive statewide needs assessment every 3 years. And it's on a schedule. Our next 3-year comprehensive statewide needs assessment will be in 2 years, because ours was due a year ago. It was completed this past year, and they don't change the schedule of when they're due. And so this needs assessment, and we had planned potentially to walk through this at our most recent community forum, but I'm gonna walk through right now. I think I have plenty of time to walk through the needs assessment that was done and provide information for people who may not have. I will say this, when I look at the PowerPoint, it draws me into the document. And so you may find, once you see, and we'll share the PowerPoint so people can look at that later, you may see when you look at the recommendations, because that's all I'm going to go over, or what the recommendations were from the various sections, it draws me in to say, wait a minute, where exactly did that come from? How did they come up with that recommendation? I thought we were really strong there. Are we missing something? Always, whenever you have these done, from my perspective anyway, you think, oh, one person complained about that. But anyway, I'm going to walk through this now. I'm going to do my best to share my screen and see if I am able to do this. There it is. Are people seeing?
Yes.
DDS, Rehabilitation Services Administration Comprehensive Statewide Needs Assessment. It was conducted by a coordination between ProMesa, which is a local provider, and San Diego State University, the Interwork Institute there. They've actually done at least 3 of ours. And that's a really experienced VR team that does these across the country. So the goals of the comprehensive statewide needs assessment are many. It's to look at the overall agency performance. to look very specifically about the needs of people with most significant disability, including the need for supported employment services, to look at the needs of people with disabilities who are minorities, to determine groups who are unserved or underserved by the VR program, to look at the needs of youth and students with disabilities in transition, to look at the needs of people with disabilities served through other statewide workforce development system components, to look at the need to establish, develop, or improve community rehabilitation programs, which would be our provider network in DC, and to look at the needs of businesses and the effectiveness of the VR program in serving employers. So first, they look at our agency performance, and this was due in 2023, so it looked all the way through program year 2022. As you can see, we actually, and this trend has continued, and we've been talking about this internally. There's been, you could imagine from program year 20 through program year 22 that there was some decrease in applications received, COVID. And I will also say, I think that we have been very slow to recover from COVID. I went to the Council on State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation Services conference in the fall, and states there talked about program year, the one that just passed. They call that, I don't know if they call it 23 or 24, since it's 6 months of each. Their program year goes from July 1 to June 30, and the fiscal year goes from October 1 to September 30. So it gets a little confusing. My point was, however, almost all states said that by last year, they had fully recovered and they were seeing a much higher demand for VR services. We have not seen that. And that's going to be something that we'll be addressing in our state plan in the coming year, I expect. Percent of applicants found eligible, 81% in program year 20, up to 92% in program year 22. The percent closed before IPE development, 1%. That's pretty good, frankly. Because I know, and it may be, I know that we often see numbers in the past, and when I talk about past, I'm talking more distant past, I will admit, when we were tracking referrals to applications to eligible, you would see a pretty significant drop off at each level because people come in interested in services and then they decide maybe it's not the right time and they don't follow. When we look at the percent eligible, it tends not to be that the person doesn't meet the eligibility requirements, but that they've determined not to pursue services at this time. Employment rate at exit. The employment rate is looking at the number of people who, after receiving, the percentage of people who, after receiving services, close successfully, which means with an employment outcome. I will say those numbers, 38%, 42%, and 44% are low. Pre-WIOA, which for me doesn't feel like that long ago, even though I know it's more than 10 years ago. Pre-WIOA, this was one of our performance indicators, and that number had to be higher than 55.8%. So that's something else that we'll want to be looking at in our goal in the coming year. So on section 1 regarding agency performance, the recommendations. Shoot, now I don't know how to go backwards. Here it is, right here, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to move you all out of my way. So number 1, we should be exploring options to locate counselors in satellite or co-located co-locations to reach clients in all areas of DC. This has been something that, as I said, we're still not fully recovered from COVID. Pre-COVID, we had like 37 satellite sites. We met with people across the city and we identified various agencies that would refer people to us and then offered to have counselors at their site so that we could facilitate that. Encouraged to create a training and staff development.
You can kind of move it.
Well, see, I tried to move it before.
See how it has the different settings?
There we go. I can make it smaller even.
Yeah.
There we go. Now I'm better. Encouraged to create a training and staff development advisory group to inform the development and subsequent revisions of the new employee orientation process to ensure that it is comprehensive and designed to build initial capacity. Encouraged to develop a series of professional development training for VR staff and provider organizations to understand the broad needs of individuals with disabilities. Encouraged to review and revise communication protocols and expectations with counselors and establish new performance standards to facilitate client relationships, which is partly about the low percentage of successful closures where people are losing contact with clients. Consider a broad outreach campaign, including opportunities for all staff to engage in community events to build public trust in the agency. Consider initiating projects focusing on career pathways and emerging fields, for example, STEM, AI, to offer new opportunities to DC residents with disabilities. Encouraged to formulate an internal task force focused on improving processes such as eligibility, referral, client participation, engagement, retention, and overall service delivery. The development of data sharing agreements should be considered. Consider utilizing a more robust annual satisfaction survey to focus on understanding the root causes of challenges arising in the system with solutions created to address these challenges, and explore partnerships with other DC agencies to address housing, mental health, and other basic needs of people with disabilities. So that would be in the area of performance, recommendations about how to improve. And as I said, as you look at the PowerPoint, it may draw you back. You can then go into the 185-page document to see what the specifics of what the specifics were that created those recommendations. Next is the section regarding people with most significant disabilities, which is actually the vast majority of people that we serve in the VR program. And that would be people who are eligible generally for supported employment services. The recommendation, plural, recommendations, consider introducing adaptive technologies, assistive devices tailored to people's needs. DCRSA should utilize the job accommodation network to provide job seekers, providers, and employers with accommodation options and best practices. May consider improving the availability of supported employment and job coaching services and increasing the funding for supported employment programs. DCRSA may consider implementing a survey of providers to explore potential barriers to engaging as a supported employment vendor. And I'm going to just go through these without commenting on every one, because as I read each one, I'm tempted to comment. May consider extending the availability of supported employment services to all disability communities with special programs tailored to deaf and hard of hearing. DCRSA should train staff to develop IPEs that cater to each person's needs, preferences, and strengths. It should also implement regular reviews and updates to the plans to ensure that they remain relevant and practical. DCRSA should consider offering specialized training to counselors in mental health first aid and trauma-informed care. DCRSA may explore hiring or contracting mental health professionals to provide counseling and support directly within the DCRSA framework. Consider using specialized providers with expertise in particular services, such as customized employment and individual placement and support. DCRSA should implement financial literacy programs that teach budgeting, saving, and money management skills, and provide benefit counseling to help people understand and maximize public benefits while pursuing employment. Explore options to reduce caseload sizes by hiring more counselors, prioritizing people with complex needs, and investing in case management tools to free up counselor time for direct support. The next area was underserved and unserved populations. So what they did here is break down by ward the percentage of people in each ward and in DC as a whole based on race and ethnicity. And I'll just go through the DC line here, which is in the district. And this is according to the American Community Survey. 11.7% of people are Hispanic or Latino of any race. 36.7% of people in the district are white, identify as white. 41.7% identify as Black or African American. 0.2% identify as American Indian or Alaska Native. 4.1% identify as Asian. 0.1% identify as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and 5% identify as 2 or more races. And I'm hoping it's here, but okay. So what they didn't include here is a comparison of the people served by RSA compared with this chart right here. I just know this from the top of my head, the major groups, which is that we are still apparently underserving Hispanic because we're, I think, at about 5%. This is just from my memory. We technically, I think, are probably underserving people who are white because that is less than 10%. Black or African American is almost 90% of the people served by RSA. Asian, I think, is right around the percentage that's indicated there. I think it's 3%. This says 4%. And I don't know that we track 2 or more races in how we do our data. We could, but. So they have some recommendations, which I find interesting only because well, okay, no commentary. I'll just go through them. DCRSA is encouraged to enhance the environment and culture of inclusion within its internal staff and vendor community through a deliberate and embedded approach to cultural understanding and inclusion. This may include providing tailored and immersive training on cultural sensitivity and effective responsiveness. DCRSA is encouraged to use broad data-based decision-making to effectively improve outreach, employment, and training for underserved populations, analyzing data and statistics to understand population-based service gaps should be incorporated into the agency's ongoing efforts. DCRSA should consider introducing efforts to engage more ASL interpreters to serve clients better and more effectively. This may include reaching out to businesses regarding inclusive interview and hiring practices. DCRSA should consider a broader community-based service delivery model by internal staff. This should emphasize the importance of understanding and meeting clients where they are, that is, in their respective communities, and acknowledging and respecting their intersectional identities. Continue to explore options to locate VR services with CRPs in satellite or co-located offices beyond the American Job Centers or other, and also in community cultural centers. Consider establishing new partnerships and building on current partnerships with community organizations not typically engaged with VR, but embedded in the community. For example, cultural centers, places of worship, foster care agencies, shelters, food banks, community centers. These efforts could increase awareness of VR services and build trust in these underserved communities. DCRSA is encouraged to recruit and hire additional bilingual staff in alignment with the most spoken languages in DC to increase communication ability with underserved populations. The next section they look at is youth and students with disabilities. And their recommendations in this area were implement a stronger monitoring and data collection process to become more focused on student growth and development. This would allow DCRSA to understand trends in real time and develop plans for improvement with their partners in education and workforce to address transition gaps. DCRSA would benefit from reestablishing and nurturing relationships with charter and public schools and evaluating mechanisms for ensuring equitable access to services for students in charter schools. DCRSA is encouraged to formulate an outreach plan to educate and support transition staff in all schools in reaching youth and families, and to ensure all students with disabilities have information about access to VR services. DCRSA could consider establishing a transition systems task force to work with education and other partners to understand the root causes of complexity, access, and equity issues and develop improvement ideas. DCRSA is encouraged to explore ways to increase and improve safe transportation options for youth with disabilities in DC. DCRSA might explore options with WMATA to identify available options and solutions for developing additional transportation resources to keep youth safe. As I said, without statewide workforce development system. And this is about RSA's coordination, excuse me, with the wider workforce system in DC. DCRSA is encouraged to create and facilitate disability awareness training for DOES staff. Other opportunities for cross-training in both systems could be explored, and collaboration could be built across systems. DCRSA is encouraged to increase the use of co-located or designated staff at each DOES office, and vice versa whenever possible. DOES should seek to broaden the use of effective collaborative practices highlighted by the Center for Advancing Policy on Employment for Youth and other national centers. An essential resource on advancing partnerships with WIOA Title I programs includes unlocking the potential of Title I. In addition, DCRSA could work collaboratively with DOES to develop training to support the opportunity populations intended to be served by Title I. Title I being the youth services, the services administered by DOES. DCRSA, in partnership with DOES and education, should explore opportunities to expand summer employment and work-based learning through program options outside of Title IV of WIOA. Our community rehabilitation providers, which is our provider network. DCRSA may consider holding regularly CRP engagement meetings quarterly that would include DCRSA leadership and CRP directors and staff to facilitate ongoing dialogue about emerging issues and opportunities for people with disabilities across DC. This could evolve into a community of practice among the CRPs to advance competitive integrated employment across the district. DCRSA is encouraged to develop a small working group of CRPs and DCRSA staff to address the needs associated with the current funding model and the ability of CRPs to engage effectively. DCRSA may benefit from developing a network of additional CRPs to address the needs of individuals with disabilities from underserved communities. This activity may involve an environmental scan and analysis of some critical barriers and why some CRPs choose not to engage as DCRSA vendors. And the last section, the needs of businesses and the effectiveness in serving employers. DCRSA may consider the development and implementation of a broad business outreach plan in partnership with DOES and other city systems. This outreach plan should include the opportunity to offer training on disability awareness, inclusion, and employment practices. DCRSA should enhance business relationships to encourage employers to utilize flexible work arrangements, such as remote work and flexible hours. That's not a big one here in DC, coming up soon. DCRSA is encouraged to develop a working group to investigate the use of assistive technology, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies to strengthen its support of the business community in providing accommodations to people with disabilities. DCRSA should expand its work with the Regional ADA Center and national centers focused on employer practices to provide more significant resources to businesses operating within the city. DCRSA may consider partnering with other VR systems to develop a community of practice related to best practices and strategies for business engagement. DCRSA may consider developing a labor market task force in partnership with DOES and key industry members in DC to develop a plan to support business in meeting these emerging needs. And that is the very comprehensive statewide needs assessment. And I think what you can really see from that is, as you go through it several times, I will say, and really refer back to the document, you begin to see what are the things we want to be focusing on. And then it starts to form a really good basis for a plan with goals and objectives and measurable indicators for the upcoming 3 years. So are there any thoughts about that very comprehensive statewide needs assessment?
Hey, Andy, it's Deborah. First of all, thank you for giving us the Cliff Notes. That's extremely helpful. I think one of the things that I was thinking about is I know you name a particular agency specifically around some of this work. But I was wondering, as certainly as the WIC is trying to centralize some things like how we're collecting data and labor market information so that we all have the same information, I'm wondering, whether or not there are opportunities to think about how the WIC can play a role in convening and facilitating some of this work to help, not only, bridge between DDS and DOES, but also across the workforce system with all of the other agency partners as well. So would love to see an opportunity for the WIC to play a bigger role in supporting some of those efforts as well.
That sounds great. And as I said, one of our first next step is internally to look at this and identify what we've identified as the priorities. And then in February, I'm going to send out an invite to everyone for an ad hoc committee on the state plan and bring people together who have taken the time to review the whole needs assessment. And we can then talk together about what we want our goals and objectives to be and how we can look at these various things. Because you're right, when I look at like employer engagement, we have been talking for more than 10 years about the fact that business engagement needs to be coordinated. And one of
Yes,
the biggest complaints from employers in the district is don't have 8 different people come ask me to hire their person. Work with
correct,
each other.
right.
And you know, in Maryland, for example, their provider community shares the names of all their business contacts with
Yes,
the VR agency.
yes, they do.
And in DC, we tend to hold all of those close to our vest, which doesn't work in terms of building relationships with businesses. But I
Yeah.
do think, yes, this needs to be as comprehensive as we can make it. The other thing I will do tomorrow is send out to everyone here the current goals and objectives in our state plan, so you can see sort of where we're starting from. And then we'll go from, okay, based on what we've been working on, what the needs assessment shows, what kinds of adjustments do we want to make going forward, so that we're not just starting from a completely blank slate.
And the only other thing, really quickly, and then I will let others talk as well, is our upcoming workforce summit for 2025 will take place in September. I have a real interest in making sure that it is mandatory that participants attend certain sessions. And I think a session that really talks about service provision for people with disabilities and what that looks like and tools and all of that sort of thing. I would love to circle back and have that conversation and make sure that it is part of the fabric of our summit this year.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts people had about the comprehensive statewide needs assessment?
I will say for me, just in the work that I do, I think it's specifically in that first section, outlining like some of the training needs of counselors. I've been here, this is my coming up on my 10th year in November. And that's something I think that we kind of miss the mark on. We don't have a trainer or a training system or a process, but I also like the idea of incorporating the seasoned counselors in that and seeing, you know, like trying to put pieces together to create that counselor orientation. I also like the idea of incorporating more training for staff, such as like the mental health, and there was one other recommendation that they
trauma informed.
Yeah, trauma informed. So we could definitely incorporate a lot more training that is more geared towards, you know, supporting our counselors here. I know that the CRC is no longer required by the state plan, but we also have a lot of counselors who do have that. And in years past, we provided trainings that, you know, provided CEUs. And so we kind of lack the professional development a little bit there. I also have a background, you know, in the deaf and hard of hearing, so I would like to read that report just a little bit because I'm curious about where kind of they got some of the needs as far as like ASL interpreting. We have 2 staff here who are naturally signers, that is their first language, that work in that department or in that unit. But then we also have staff such as myself and another individual, I think maybe like 3 more who actually sign too. So we have I think a large community here, not as big as it was when I first came, but I would be interested to see that. So those are some of the highlights, some of the takeaways that I would be interested in looking kind of more into myself.
Other thoughts people had?
This is Riola. Take this camera off here. I received an email that had the attachment to it, which was great. I have not read the full 193 pages, but I got through a good, maybe a third of it. it's very detailed. I was so enthralled in it. It was very comprehensive and a superior job. And I would like to piggyback on what the young lady, I'm sorry, I just forgot her name, but I too saw this area where there would be training or suggestion of training for current counselors in the mental health, trauma, and first aid. And I think that's significant. But then there was one thought I had about that that sort of coupled with the idea of getting other agencies that have individuals who have already been trained in that area specifically. The thought about that is counselors who get the training, but not getting overwhelmed with areas like trauma. If they're not really comfortable, they can be on overload and might not be as effective versus someone in another partner agency who's equipped to do that counseling as well as trauma assistance. So those two, I kind of was concerned about bridging that with people who are in current counselor roles to not put them in position where they feel so overwhelmed and then not speak up that they feel uncomfortable with being in those roles, even though they may get the training. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I will also say, I expect hearing all of this, if you're new to our agency, would be a little overwhelming. One thing I will say is close to 50% of the people who get services here have a mental or behavioral health diagnosis. So
And if it's not
that being,
diagnosed,
if
it comes
it's
up
not,
later.
if it isn't the primary reason that they're getting services, related to the fact that they have their disability and the various challenges, they may also have a co-occurring mental health issue. And so having that kind of additional training for our staff is essential, because whether this is something that is primarily what they do, it's something they are going to be doing. So ensuring that they're well equipped is really important.
And I also think, like, I know that this is sent out to staff here, or that once it's completed, there is a link, but I think it would also be helpful to have a meeting and go over this, like, in an all-hands RSA meeting, so that our counselors are aware of this. So they can also see, because this kind of helps to kind of, I guess, derive like what our goals should be. And as someone who's coming into, not new to RSA, but new to being with the SRC, that just opened a bunch of doors for me, and maybe you too, I guess. So those were some of my other thoughts as well.
Other thoughts other than, wow, that was comprehensive?
This is Allison with the DD Council. Yes, it was comprehensive. The other thought that was going through my mind was from the discussion I was hearing the other day about the goals for the technical assistance with the NEON grant this year, wanting to focus some of that on some stories or videos or public awareness or whatever it might look like, showing people with the most significant disabilities in jobs, helping people really envision that. That seems super aligned with what was in that needs assessment. So just noting a connection there.
So, as I said, our next step is going to be, I'm going to send out our existing goals and objectives that are developed along with the SRC so that people can see where they are now. And you have our now current comprehensive statewide needs assessment. So then we can start looking at where does this need to be strengthened so that we can move forward more effectively, given what's been raised in this year's comprehensive statewide needs assessment. And I will be scheduling a time in February for people who are interested in being on an ad hoc committee so that we can talk together about pulling those those goals together and objectives together and really developing an outline of a plan that will then have a schedule for how do we get input from the various stakeholder communities that we engage with, so that we make sure that we hear from agency staff, from our provider community, from our stakeholders, and that we have a really comprehensive plan that's ready to be submitted for approval to the Department of Ed by July 1. Any other comments about that? I did not include this on the agenda. We are still in the process of recruiting / I hope hiring a deputy director for the Rehabilitation Services Administration. I've been doing 2 jobs for 6 months now. And so one of the challenges is that positions above a certain level require additional approval within the district government beyond just our agency, even when we have independent hiring authority. One thing I will note, having been in this position before and having supervised the position, I believe it is essential that the person who leads RSA be a VR professional. And so we have actually not had a VR certified rehabilitation counselor as the leader of RSA since 2010. And so that has been one of the things that's made recruitment more difficult. But we are continuing to move forward on this. And I hope that within, I've been told very soon, we'll be able to make some announcement about a decision there. I really hope. But as I say, I am going to continue in the recruitment with my expectation that it be a VR professional who's responsible for the Rehabilitation Services Administration. And so while that may require me to continue doing 2 jobs for longer, I think it's essential. Any other items that people have or questions people have?
Can I ask a question that is just a question? It's come to our attention just from the clients that we represent, that youth and young adults who are placed either by DYRS or some other, maybe HSCSN or DBH, who are placed out of state in facilities, whether it's sort of detention facilities or it's a PRTF or an RTC, that they do not have, well, at least it seems like it, that they don't have like an RSA counselor assigned to them to sort of, you know, like how there is one for the public schools and there is actually, I believe, one for YSC and for New Beginnings, to just, you know, to let them know, like, you know, you can apply for these services. And I'm just wondering, is that correct? It does look like that we have one client where it was in Pennsylvania placed by a DYRS, and we checked and there wasn't anybody assigned. And so we've been, you know, doing outreach to the client and making sure they know about applying for RSA services. So when they return, I'm just curious if there is someone and we just don't know it, or how that works.
You know, there is not, and that's a good point, and we should talk about that in transition, sort of, you know, is that a person who's assigned to whoever's out of state? And then we would work with, there's a person, I think it's a person at DCPS who is responsible for all those people who are placed out of state.
Okay.
It's been a challenge, you may be aware, on both sides of the agency, making sure that we're doing well on support and transition for people who are placed out of state.
Right.
Because there is the same obligation for those youth on the part of the school system when they're
Right, yeah,
working.
no, I know that. So yeah, I'm just thinking if there is some sort of coordination, because I feel like those kids get lost for so many reasons. You know, a lot of times they don't have strong family ties or family that can take care of them or whatever it is and don't have connections.
Right, there isn't a person, but I think that's a really interesting suggestion. And the other thing to keep in mind is that there is the ability to have a VR case open in 2 states at once. So if you had a person who was placed in Pennsylvania, they could get like potentially like pre-employment transition services there, or if they needed VR services there, and have a case open here so that you don't have the delays in the transition.
No, that's a good
But
point.
having a
Same service
person,
at the same time.
exactly, we can't provide the same service to a
Right,
person. Like,
right.
if they have like, for example, there are lots of states that pay for people to come here to get education. And the person then decides to stay here. We don't pick up the continuing education. We don't pay for the, like, the other state has on their plan the education, but the supports they need here to then get the job, we can then pick those up. And we coordinate between the 2 states. But I do think the idea of having a person in VR who's responsible for all of those, regardless of where they are, is an interesting thing to consider.
Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully those numbers are going down. But
Okay.
that's from one of your other hats, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Other comments or questions?
Do we know when they did that research, how many transition youth fall off in their transition with RSA or stop, you know, like fall off into adulthood? Like what percentage of students kind of fall off that cliff?
Well, okay, so one of the performance metric that I would look at in regards to that, because the fact that a student has disabilities and gets even pre-employment transition services may or may not mean that they need VR services. So I don't want to see them as falling off.
Right.
However, there is in the special education system under the Office of the State Superintendent for Education, they have performance metrics for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Indicators 13 and 14 relate to us at RSA. 13 and DDA, frankly. Indicator 13 is about whether the state agent, whether the IEP team is inviting the right staff to planning meetings in order to transition, in order to help the student transition. So that if a student may be receiving behavioral health services, VR services, DDA services, post-school, they should be discussing with the parents and the student, would you like us to invite that service delivery provider so that the student can receive, so that we can transition those services. Their performance on that indicator is very good. That's all I'll say. I'm not commenting on how it's measured or anything about beyond that. They focus very much on improving our performance on indicator 13, because back in like 2011, 12, it was less than 10%. And it got up to better than 90%. Indicator 14, which I think is the more significant one for us as the VR agency, is of students with IEPs in school, what percentage 1 year after exiting the system are engaged in employment, training, or post-secondary education. In DC, we have improved, and we're now at about 50%. That means 50% of youth, 1 year after exiting, you can go up to Gallery Place and find them. I mean, it's, to me, that's where we need to focus our energies, which is, that's the people who have fallen off. That 1 year out of school, they're not engaged in work, training, or other education. And that is really I've spoken with our transition units about this. Like, that's where we need to be focused. People getting access to college after school, you know, we have lots of very informed, very well-resourced families that see VR as an opportunity to help support the kid through college. There are lots of supports for college. I'm more worried, and I'm not saying we're not supporting people in college, but I am more worried about that 50% who 1 year later are not engaged in any training, employment, or other post-secondary education. That was a long answer to your question, wasn't it? Sorry. Any other questions, thoughts that people have? Well, thank you, everyone. We're starting off, Happy New Year. We're starting off 2025 really well with a fully constituted State Rehab Council. And I look forward to working with everyone and really having some good conversation about what does our plan look like for the next 3 years? How can we make it stronger so that we're improving our services? Have a great day, everyone. And we will talk again. As I said, I'm going to be sending some communication out about the various committees, about our upcoming meeting to talk about our state plan development and also our prior state plans.
Thank you.